And hello YouTube, welcome back to Cover 2 Credits. And today, I'm going to go through a graphic novel that I like a lot, one of my favorite graphic novels. We're going to start with over my left shoulder, The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller. And it's one of those, it's a staple in anybody who knows much about graphic novels or knows much about comic books knows at least of this book. And it's poignant right now because when they announced Batman v Superman, the guy that at Comic-Con, I can't remember who it was, read a line from this comic that was the announcement for it. When you see the trailer and you see Batman in the mech suit, or the armored suit, and the glowing eyes, and he's talking to Superman, that's almost directly from this comic. Now, this is a little different now than normal Batman, and I'm not sure how much Batman v Superman is going to come into this, but one major difference is this Batman is old Batman. Gray hair, has been kind of retired. They do a lot to show his age in this Batman, and which is fine. I mean, that shows a lot of how he has to get around things because he is older. He's not as agile. He's not as fast. They do a lot with him using surroundings, and obviously it's Batman. He uses everything, but whether at one point that he's on horseback, and it's a very poignant, well-known image you see of him riding the horse through. You've got some different characters around Gotham City, whether it's the gang of the mutants, they call them, and the mutant leader is a big fight scene in this. And they obviously, Superman and Batman are the large fight in this comic, and you'll see that, and they do things very, very differently, and it's a very, very good comic to read if you like either character. Obviously, it's a Batman based, they go more into that side, but it's very, very good to read either way. The art style is a little different. When you look at a page, this isn't something that's necessarily going to be clean paneled out. It's not like that. There may be little blurbs or little images that have little speech bubbles, but it's almost a gritty, kind of dirty art style. It's not like the graceful, smooth line. It's very jagged and very hard, and that's the whole book is like that. And that makes it a little different too, is because sometimes you're looking at things, it's not confusing, but it's different. Comics now don't necessarily use that kind of art. Not that that's bad, not that that's good. The art is enjoyable, the book is still very good, it's a good read, but the art style is very different. We'll hopefully have a few examples to show you. The ending, I'm not going to spoil anything, but the ending is a nice nod to things, not for the future of what they were, where they were, but for the future of that story. And they've done a few things with, they did an animated version of this, Warner Bros. Did, and I haven't got a chance to see it. I'd like to. It's supposed to be very, very good. Obviously, some people don't like it because it's not exactly what the comic did and things like that. I will say this comic was important at the time because no one had done anything quite like it. They were still very, very clean-cut comic books. The Boy Scout of Superman was very clean-cut, was very pure. They were still dealing with some of the repercussions of the comics code and all of that stuff. If you know anything about comic book history, there was a time where you couldn't do a lot of things in comics because it would get red-listed, blacklisted by the comics code, and you wouldn't be able to sell them, or people wouldn't buy them if they didn't have the stamp from the comics code. Well, Frank Miller and a few others kind of broke that mold, and opened the doors in the late 80s to the 90s for comics to just explode and change, and they all went through a dive and they've all come back up, and now you see them with all the movies coming out all the time. You know, there are comic book movies upwards of, I think, 30 coming out in the next 5 to 6 years or something like that. It's a very, very high number in a very condensed amount of time, that if you would have talked to anybody when that book came out, they wouldn't have believed you that was ever going to happen, let alone there be a single movie. This popularity of this possibly, well, I'm almost positive, helped push them to make the 85 Batman with Keaton. And that by itself helped get everything rolling again. So not only is this a good book for Batman fans, for comic fans, but it was an important book for comics history to kind of get rolling back into what it is now. And yes, it's a long time, but it was one of the forerunners of not caring what was going to happen when you wrote this. They kind of like punched you in the face if you cared, because that was what they were going to write. Frank Miller still does that, whether it's any of his books. If you read them, he doesn't pull punches. It's gritty, it's to the point, and I really, really like the book. I would recommend it to anybody. I'm not necessarily going to rate it, because comics are hard to rate, especially because it's a kind of a one-shot. Like, if it was part of a grouping, maybe I could rate that, but this is kind of a one-off. I'll tell you, I recommend you to read it, for one, to see the art style, and if you enjoy Batman, it's a good Batman story. Also, this will have any kind of a heads up if you know what's going to happen to lead into Batman v Superman. It'll be interesting to see what they take from this and what they don't. You know, that if you have any suggestions for the comics you think I'd like to read, I'm up for anything. I try to read a little bit of here or there. Obviously, Batman's my favorite, but I don't mind. I like Marvel a lot. Or like, subscribe, and thanks for staying until after the credits.